So welcome to Learner Centered Collaboratives, first of 3 webinars about putting learners at the center, specifically at the beginning of the school year. I am so excited to share this amazing panel with you all. Truly coast to coast, we're bringing different perspectives, different grade levels, different roles from different schools to think about how we put students in the driver's seat. Before we start, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Kelsey Payne. I am the VP of Community Engagement at Learner Centered Collaborative. And the work that I really do is remove silos around innovative work and try to connect folks who are working to put learners at the center. And so this is just one of the many things that we're offering right now, this webinar. And so let's dive in. I know that I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask the panelists. So let's move it along. As I mentioned, this is one of 3. So if you're attending today's panel, you can also attend on June 28th and July 19th, where we'll be focusing on different pieces. Today, we're really focusing on that educator perspective of how we're doing this on the ground in the classroom. Then next week, we'll focus on school leaders of how you set that tone at the school leader level. And then on July 19th, we'll look at it at the district level. Great. Okay, so let's introduce our panelists. So I am going to start with Kelsey Simpson, who's joining us from Key School in Palo Alto, California. Kelsey, do you just want to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kelsey Simpson. I'm the second Kelsey in the room. And I am a 5th, 6th social studies teacher and 5th grade team leader, like advisory team leader in Palo Alto at Key School.
Great. And we're going to kick it over to Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Corey. I work for Davis District in Utah, and I am currently teaching career and technical education. I've been teaching for 8 years. I started in elementary school, and I've taught in a lot of different settings, but I love teaching.
Great. And we're going to move it over to Orly. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Orly Friedman. I am the founder and head of school of Redbridge. Redbridge is a relatively new independent school located in San Francisco. We launched in September 2020.
Great. And rounding us out, Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I am the Director of Technology, and I'm also a lead classroom teacher at Portfolio School, which is a project-based learning school in Tribeca in New York City. And yeah, all about the tech and the kiddos.
All right, great. So I am actually going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see you all. And let's start with our first question. So I always like to start with just defining what learner-centered means to you. I think, your experience, your community, the position you sit in really can shape what that means to you. So I'm actually going to start with Orly. If you could share, what does learner-centered mean to you?
Sure. So learner-centered for us at Redbridge is really about giving students a sense of agency over their learning and their lives. And we have a really specific definition of what agency is, which is the ability to set meaningful goals and have the will and skill to achieve them. And so everything that we're doing to be learner-centered is teaching students how to set their own goals and then develop the work habits so that they have the will and the skill to be able to achieve them and really be self-directed in their learning and their lives.
Great. Kelsey?
Yeah, I really think of learner-centered as designing with and for the students. I think that a lot of the planning can feel kind of scary because it might go in not fully hashed out exactly what the end product will be, but that's because you're letting learners be sort of like in the driver's seat with you. I sort of think of it sometimes as like the driver's ed car, where they might be in the driver's seat, but you've also got those pedals to help sort of safely direct them in the way that they are building those skills and learning along the way.
Great, Amy, and then Amanda.
Yeah, I think of learner-centered as inclusive for all students. So in other words, every student has access to what's happening in the classroom. I'm not leaving anybody out. And this has become really important to me over the last several years because I have a daughter who has an IEP. She's 15 years old now. And it's very important to me whenever I'm planning to make sure that whatever I plan, any student could engage in and could find success with what it is that we're doing.
Those are all wonderful points. To add on to them, I want to say that I think for me, Learn Centered is not just about hitting all of the core academic skills that children need as they're developing, but creating a sense of relevancy to each student individually. Having that emergent and developing curriculum as you go, and also making sure that those skills and those topics and disciplines are something that your students can be passionate about, and develop that real sense of agency, and that, oh, okay, I'm actually invested in this now because it's meaningful to me, and I actually want to see the end of this project through, and it's not just the tedious, okay, I'm just doing this for its own sake. And in addition to the curriculum aspect of it, also creating the environment for the students as well, so they go into the classroom feeling like this is my second home, this is my place, and these are my people in my community.
Yeah, those are all great. I saw some of you nodding along, and I hope our attendees are as well, even though we can't see you. As I move into my next question, I just wanted to remind you all that if you do have a question, feel free to pop it in. I have a few questions I am excited to ask this crew, but if you have one, a burning question, I will pop it in. All right, so my next question is, why is it important to set the tone of learner-centered at the start of the school year? And I think that could also feed into if you have an example that you want to share of what you all are doing in your context, but just kind of pairing that importance with an example if you have one. I'm going to actually go in reverse this time. So Amanda, I'm going to start with you.
Perfect. I have a lot to say about that. I think that first of all, setting the tone before you even step foot into the classroom is so crucial. And kind of as I just mentioned, curating that environment to not just, this is my classroom and you folks are all in here to learn and then go home and do whatever it is you do when you leave the school. But again, creating that sense of this is our community. So first off, before the kids even set foot in the door, reaching out to the parents and offering like intro surveys and asking them to tell you about their students, their needs, specifically, the way that they've found that their kids learn the best. We discuss things like IEPs, but there's always really small little things that you can do at the beginning of the year to be extra accommodating. Like you might have a parent who finds that their learner works really, really well in quiet situations. And I think that's some people might say like, okay, everybody works better in quiet situations, but certain students have a little bit higher sensory needs than others, and just general things. Getting to know your students before they even get in the door not only tells the parents that you're really invested, but it also shows the kids like, oh, you know what, my teacher is really excited for me to be here. This is going to be my place as well. And then, when you're starting off the school year, actually having the kids participate in curating their environment. So asking the children these questions as well, like, what do you do best as a learner? And those can be really big questions, especially for like early elementary school, but there's always a way to scaffold things up and down. My coworkers sometimes tease me because I'm like, we could build a rocket with a kid if you just scaffold it down to the correct level, and I do believe that's true. So creating again that environment of, this is your place, how can I work with you, instead of like, you're coming in to work within these set parameters. It's how do we build these parameters for you to work the best.
Amy, do you want to add on to that?
Sure. I love what Amanda said, and I love what the panelists have said so far. Like it would be amazing to just collaborate all the way across country and share ideas together. I teach 7th and 8th graders, and I feel like it's so important right from the beginning of the year to do small things that kind of make an unwritten pact with the students that tell them, I see them and I honor their needs. Just like Amanda said, I want to know what their needs are. I know a lot of teachers are really strict with just even things like policies, like, you have to have permission to go to the bathroom. I try to give students a lot of freedom. You know, you understand what you need physically. You take care of it when you need to take care of it. Just let me know when you're going, because I'm responsible for you when you're in my classroom. I use flexible seating. I give different options for choices. I have several different yoga balls in my classroom. Not all students need them, but the students who do need them really benefit from them. So I try to have policies and procedures in place that meet the needs of all students, really a universal design for learning, where I know that if an accommodation is necessary for a student with an IEP, that student with an IEP may not ask for the accommodation. I know my daughter will not ask for an accommodation. However, if I make that accommodation available to all my students, then it's not going to hurt the ones who don't really need it, but it may help them. It may be really beneficial to them. So, you know, things like extended time, or especially opportunities to choose how they present to me what they've learned, multiple opportunities to present to me how they show me what they've learned, and then, you know, give them the time that they need and the space that they need to do it.
I love what is being said so far. I totally agree, Amanda and Amy, that these are like, there's also just this like magical energy about the beginning of the year that is not repeatable. And so really harnessing that as they come in, to let them know that we are there for them. Like Amanda said, like co-designing like the learning space together. I really love to have the students help design what the class jobs are going to be, so that there is a sense of ownership of the classroom, so that it's not my classroom, it's our classroom together. And then making sure that everybody's got a job, or that we've got like a nice rotation going, so that everybody's got a sense of ownership in there. And similar to what Amy said, absolutely, in terms of like learning aids, why not make them available? We do like a little lesson at the beginning of the year talking about what you need for your learning, and that you're the best to decide what that is on this specific day. Sometimes it means standing at the back of the classroom. Sometimes it means like balancing on one leg. Sometimes it means just making yourself comfortable to learn, because without that comfort and knowing that you're taken care of, the learning is going to be a lot more limited than if you know that you're in a space that takes care of you. I think another part that I really resonated with Amanda on is getting to know the kids early in the year. I think that learning about their identity is paramount for making them feel like they belong in a space. And that provides so many opportunities for kids to connect with one another. And so we'll do I Am From poems at the beginning of the year in 6th grade. And we're so fortunate to have outdoor education, where we go on a trip with the kids at the start of the year. And let me tell you, that is a great way to get to know everyone, is to have a little trip together for a couple of nights. But all of that sort of goes together to understand who these learners are, both inside the classroom and out.
Well, I've enjoyed hearing about all of these specific things that are happening in each of your schools and classrooms. And I guess for me, learner-centered at the beginning of the year, it's really important, I would say, for parents to understand that that is the culture of your classroom. And so spending time before the school year starts, bringing parents in and explaining what they should be able to expect out of the school year, and also sharing with them the language that you use, or that, you know, for us, that we use in our classroom to support students, especially around growth mindset, and focusing on the effort students are putting in no matter where they're starting the year. And that allows us to think about every student in their own starting place and as their own individual, and help bring parents along at the start of the year to have a similar mindset to all of our teachers. I also think similar to what many of you have said, getting to know students and their individual profiles. For us, one of the things that we're looking at is how students are able to work independently and how much structure and support they need to make choices about their learning so that we can support them in those ways. And so in the beginning of the year, we're really looking at like, how are students able to focus, use their time, and then coming up with a plan for how we're going to support them in building the work habits they need to be able to make choices about their learning, and also make sure they're getting the right amount of structure or push if they need it. And then the last piece, I think we have some really key lessons at the beginning of the year for students around growth mindset and what our teacher calls your learning line. So everyone is in a different place on their learning line. And no matter where you start, what's important is what you do along the way and what happens when you encounter obstacles. And those kind of key mindset lessons at the beginning of the year allow students to feel comfortable being wherever they are, whoever they are in their development over the course of the school year. So those are a few of our key practices that set us up for learner-centered education for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think, Orly, I'm just going to stick with that because I think what I wanted to also get at a little bit is starting at the beginning of the year or starting with learner-centered opportunities at the beginning of a learner's journey has some longer term impact or longer term effects. And, I know you are like the founder of RedBridge. And as I was thinking about your perspective, I was wondering about how you've seen that build upon each other each year. And then I'll turn to the other panelists to say, like, what are some of those longer term impacts that you see throughout the year or as your learners progress to the next grade level? But Orly, I'm going to start with you again about those longer effects.
Sure. Well, we've only been in existence here at RedBridge for 2 years. But before I started RedBridge, I was at a school called the Khan Lab School. I was on the founding team there and got to try out a lot of the practices that have been brought over to RedBridge while I was there. So I was able to see students over the course of 4 years and how it really changed them to have this learner-centered approach. And I think the thing for me that's so powerful is watching students gain really deep self-knowledge. They know what it takes for them to stay focused, to have a goal. They know who they need to go to for support and what strategies they should use to get there. And ultimately, what that means is that they can adapt. So when a pandemic happens and you have to learn from home, they're ready to be self-directed in their learning because they know themselves well enough that they can do it from anywhere. So it doesn't matter what setting you're in. And I think being able to adapt is such a superpower that we can give to students, and being student-centered and giving students opportunities to gain that self-awareness through them going through processes of setting goals and getting feedback from their peers and from their teachers. That's really how we do it. And at RedBridge, we start with 5-year-olds. And right now we have students between 5 and 8 years old. And we'll keep aging up with this cohort. And when we launched, we had 12 students. We were able to be in person all of our first year. We were able to be in person all of our second year, but we recently had COVID run through our school and had to shut down for 1 day. And so we really got to test out what would happen when our students were at home for the first time. And these are like 5, 6, 7-year-olds mostly. And we had 2 parents that emailed us independently of each other saying, "This is so cool. My kid made a schedule for what they're going to do today at home," which is like exactly what our goal is. And parents don't necessarily know that. And these 5 and 6-year-olds had come up with a schedule because they're used to coming in the morning and making their work plan for the day, and like monitoring themselves throughout the day and checking things off. So it was just natural for them to be able to take those skills and use them at home. And that's exactly what we're going for.
Great. Kelsey?
Yeah, I think that allowing students to have choice in projects, or like Amy mentioned in terms of like how they deliver their learning, just really takes their agency to like the next level. They're able to develop those interests even more. They're able to really say what they need in terms of their learning, similar to what Orly was mentioning. And I think that we create much more powerful learners when we put learners at the center, because they are making a lot of choices for themselves. And even if it does not pan out exactly as they had wanted it to, there is so much rich learning in that as well. So allowing them to make those choices, understand those consequences, both the positive and sometimes the challenging, I think really, really help students to just, I don't know, just be more full of agency, being able to choose things that they will learn or use on their like continued learning journey. It's not something that is just for that project or just right then. Those are lessons that are like exponentially can be used in really, really incredible ways.
Great. Amy, anything you want to share about the longer term impact over a year, or, you mentioned your daughter year over year?
Yeah, in my classroom, I have kids, the longest I have my classes is for a semester, but I do see that independence build in them over time, which is really fun as they start to, I present from the beginning of the year the idea that when you show me your work, traditionally we would assign an essay or we would give a quiz. And so at the beginning of the year, I will give them all kinds of options. And we have the technology now to be able to give our students all types of options where I can say, you can write for me if you want to, if that really fits your personality. But if you prefer to create a video or, a commercial or a PowerPoint or a graphic novel, or and I'll give a whole bunch of different ideas that this is how you can turn in your work. And it's fun over the semester as I have students start to come to me and say, oh, well, we decided, my partner and I decided what we're going to do is we're going to go out in the hall and interview each other and take video of that. And or students will come to me and say, well, I decided I'm going to create a scratch that shows this information, or I'm going to create a Minecraft world. And I love when they create their Minecraft worlds. And I have to say very specifically, okay, you still have to meet these parameters. You still have to show me this specific information within your Minecraft world. And then I also have to say, and you're going to have to walk me through your Minecraft world, because I cannot find my way through your Minecraft world. That is not a world that I live in. But they get so excited and they get so engaged. And when it's them presenting to me the ideas of how they're going to show me their learning, then I know that they're really independent learners, because those weren't even suggestions that I offered. They came up with them on their own. And it's really exciting to see what they can do.
Amanda?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces and something that I've been able to observe at Portfolio is actually, we have a few students who have been with the school since its beginning, and they're now towards the end of middle school. So I'm sorry, towards the end of elementary in the early middle school year, so like 5th going into 6th grade. And these students are so independent, not just in terms of their own workflow, but they have this very, very beautiful capacity to sort of take whatever is thrown at them. And now they're at this age where they do have the capacity to go online and find out new things. And in terms of new things, it's not just, hi, I can go search the internet and find information for, say, a ELA or a research project, but they have the capacity to go look up something that might supplement a robotics project, and then they'll be able to go online and search through the community to find add-ons or modifications and download those things, and then begin working on some really advanced technological project, because they are so just ready for healthy risk taking. And I think that is the biggest piece here that is going to be so influential, not just in their school lives, but in their adult lives as well, is that these kids have the capacity to say, okay, you know what, this is an enormous challenge, but it doesn't really mean, it doesn't have that same connotation that perhaps like we might have grown up with, where, oh my gosh, that's really big, I'm kind of afraid, I don't want to jump into the deep end. They look at it as, oh cool, deep end, I'm really curious about that, and I know that I started out in this really beautiful scaffolded and, you know, social emotionally supportive environment, so risks to me are now just kind of this fun and curious way to experiment on things, and I'm gonna try it. Who cares, you know? So putting that first at the beginning of the year kind of sets their tone for a very long time, which can sound scary, but actually creates these really, really independent thinkers and critical thinkers is, I think, the key term here. So I think in terms of long-term benefits, you have these kids who are able to just say, okay, that might be something that sounds foreign to me right now, but in the future it is going to be something I'm either really good at, or maybe I'm just not interested in it, and that's fine. Either of those two options are fine, you know. So that's what makes the agency and the learner-centered piece so critical.
Yeah, one question that was amazing, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that. I also saw the chat hopping in and adding in some, sharing about resilience and confidence and how, we always at Learner Centered, and I know other places too, we always use fail as the first attempt in learning. And that's something that I wish I did more of when I was younger, because now in the workforce, in my role now, I still get nervous to fail, but then reframing it as that first attempt in learning has really helped me as a learner. And I only wish I had that when I was younger. But something that was coming up for me was thinking about, we're really presenting the educator perspective right now, but I wanted to think about, is there something your school leader or a mentor of yours said to maybe give you that permission that maybe I mentioned of like, it's okay to fail forward. It's okay to, give your students this agency. It's okay for it to be a little messy. And if we have school leaders that are on the call right now, or may watch this recording, is there something they can share or do to allow educators to create that safe space for learners? And maybe orally, maybe how are you ensuring that your educators are experiencing learner-centered and also being able to practice it? Does anyone want to share? I don't have a particular order here.
I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
So something that definitely has been an influence for me is the research on what makes for a happy workplace, or people satisfied in their workplace. And so we know that it is having a sense of purpose over your work, autonomy, being able to see your own mastery as you go, and relatedness, or feeling connected to other people. And so those 4 ideas are something that I kept in mind when I was designing the teacher experience at Redbridge, but those same 4 things are equally true for the student experience. And so what we really try to do is mirror what's happening to students with what we do with our staff. So just like our students have goals that they're working towards, so do our teachers. Just like our students have weekly one-on-one check-ins with their learning guide, our teachers have a one-on-one check-in with their mentor every week. And that way our teachers are getting to experience the same kind of personalization that our students are getting, and then they're much better set up to support students because they've felt what it's like themselves. And so that's one of the ways that we support teachers in building agency for our students and a student-centered environment.
I would sort of like build onto that. We have a lot of like learner-centered practices from admin as well. Like our summer reading is a choice, and you're sort of in a book club based on the reading of your choice. Our professional development is based on like your own personal goals, and you can apply for that, and people do all kinds of cool learning and then share out about it. And I had one more idea. What was it? I'll come back.
I wanted to share just a couple of ideas that have given me some freedom in teaching. I was in a training last week where somebody said that one of the biggest compliments you can ever have as a teacher is if an administrator walks in your room and says, "Where's the teacher?" Because the teacher is in and among the students who are working on a project. And I've actually had that happen several times. And that was really reassuring to me. Sometimes it's a little disconcerting to hear your administrator say, "Where is your teacher?" and realize that they really cannot see you, and you have to say, I am here with the students. I did not leave my students alone. I wouldn't do that. But when I first started teaching, I started in a Title I school where there were some very strict ideas about what good teaching looks like. And we had some trainings that were very kind of old school as far as this is what the teacher should be doing, this is what the students should be doing. And when administrators came in, they would actually count how many there was a very specific rubric that they had of how many times do students respond and in what way, and are the children's eyes looking at the teacher. And it was very not learner centered, and it was kind of a hard place to teach. And I actually saw I had an administrator observation one day where the administrator came in, and I had already taught the lesson and I was already working with the students, but I knew what the administrator was looking for. And I felt like I had to stop and reteach that same lesson, even though it wasn't really productive. And then several months later, I had a coach in my classroom teaching. She had taught the lesson, and her supervisor came in to observe her, and she did the exact same thing that I had done. She fell back on going back and reteaching the lesson, which she had already taught, which was so boring for the students. And then, fast forward 7-8 years, actually, this was last year. I just felt like I had come to a place in my teaching where not necessarily anybody had ever said anything to me, but I had gained confidence in what I was doing with the teacher enough that I believed in what I was doing that was learner centered. So we had come to, it was nearly the last day of a project with my 7th graders. We were in the sewing lab, and they had been working on a project that was self-designed. I don't give them a pattern. I give them certain requirements, and then I tell them they have to figure it out. So it was close to the last day of the project. And an administrator came in to observe, and I thought, wow, this is probably going to be chaos. But I went down, I told the kids right up front, you guys know that this is it. We got to get this done. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to go down the roll as fast as I can. I'm going to tell you what I need from you. You can be working on it how you want to work on it. I'm going to tell you what I need from you, and then we're going to get started. So I went down the roll really quickly, each student one by one. This is what I need to see from you. This is what I still need from you. Okay, let's get started. And they all went off to their spaces, got their supplies. Some started asking me questions, but here we had this 20-minute observation that looked like, it was just so everybody's doing their own thing.
Mhm.
I probably got the best evaluation report that I've ever had from an administrator, that this was just everything that should be happening in a classroom. And it really reassured me that I'm headed in the right direction with students. So I think it's important for administrators to let teachers know that when their classrooms are learner-centered, that's where they need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Amanda, anything you want to add?
That was amazing, and that also sounds like a really fun project, and I would love to do it. But yeah, no, I wanted to just build off of what Orly and Kelsey had said about having that feedback loop almost. We actually use the Altitude platform at our school to set teacher goals as well, and then we have coworkers check in on them, which can be really helpful because you have that sort of casual sense of, okay, like this is a responsibility that I'm personally working towards. So, you're building your own agency, but you still sort of have that accountability buddy, which is really helpful.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing all of that. I wanted to move into just closing us out a little bit with some advice for others who are starting more learner-centered practices in their classroom. And then Yeah, let's do that first. And then we're probably going to close out with just something that's inspiring you right now, like a book or a podcast. So you want to keep that in the back of your mind. But our first question will be, what advice do you have for others who are on this journey? And Amanda, do you mind if I start with you?
Sure, yeah. So I think the first thing to start with is knowing the culture of where you're going to be teaching at. Know your students, know the area, know what they're all about. You're going into, if you're going into a new environment, or it's someplace that you've been into for a long time, or somewhere that you've grown up, that's amazing. Just be aware of the kids and their needs, and maybe their home life, things like that. That's one of the number one things you can go into, because then it means that you're aware of not only the way that they might function, but the way that they will react to you as a person who's in an authoritative position. And that sounds kind of anti-learning, learner centered, but it's actually a really important thing to keep in the back of your mind, because you want to always make sure that you have the kiddo in the driver's seat, as we had said. So just, again, knowing the culture, knowing how kids are going to be speaking to you, knowing how kids are going to be reacting to you in that position, number one thing. And making sure that you're, even if you have, I mean, I've worked in schools across New York City. I'm really lucky to work in a school where our ratio is fantastic. But even if you're at a school where you're like 1 to 30, try as hard as you can to keep the tree before the forest. It can be really, really overwhelming, especially when you get towards the end of the year, or you get towards report cards, or big projects are coming up. I know it starts to become kind of like a crazy frenzy, at least at my school. It's just kind of all hands on deck. But remembering that you are working with small human beings, and as hard as it can be to wrangle all of them sometimes, just they have thoughts and they have feelings, and when you create an environment where they feel seen and heard, they are going to give you their all. And when you put your heart into them, they're going to put their heart right back into you and into their work, and they're going to produce the things that you can just not even imagine or picture at the beginning of the year. So really taking the time out when you meet kids, and taking the time out when you're curating your classroom and curating your curriculum, to really put in that little bit of just, okay, here's who I am, tell me about you, and making sure that you keep that in mind as you go. Just like, I'm working with tiny humans, is just, it's so crucial. And it sounds like it sounds really, really small, and it just seems like something you would just do normally, but it becomes night and day. And I found that when you develop these relationships and you just take that time out to make those connections, it really is a world of difference in terms of what the students not only want to do for their work, but what they want to do for themselves. And they build that confidence, they build that resiliency, they build that interest. They become invested in not just their education, but their own confidence. So just social emotional.
Yeah, Amy.
Well, I would say, when you're looking at trying something that you haven't tried before, it can be a bit overwhelming, but I would say don't be afraid of being in a starting place. It's a place to start, but do start, even if you just look at something small and just say, how can I modify the environment so that it's more learner centered? How could I update my policies and procedures so they're a little bit more learner centered? How could I change the way that I accept work from students to make it more learner centered? Just take one little piece at a time. Don't feel like you have to do everything at once. Let it be a marathon. Don't let it be a race. I think I will always be looking at my practices every year and my curriculum and everything I do, and just asking myself, how can I make it more learner centered, more personalized, more what my students need so that they will thrive in the classroom.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with Amanda and Amy on this one. And Amanda, I love the tree before the forest. How beautiful is that? But I think my best advice would be to start really small. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to turn your classroom into a project-based learning, learner-centered like mecca of students at the center. Like that's really hard to do in a year. I think all of us can say that this has been like a journey. It's not something that happens right away, but there are little things that you can do to kick off the year, with like intro surveys, or letting the students design what the class jobs would be, or introducing learning tools and letting everyone know that they're available to them. It can also be choosing a different way to present your learning, like Amy had mentioned, or we kick off the year in 5th grade with a superhero change maker unit where students, it's a research project, but at the end they create a graphic novel of the life and impact of a change maker, and they choose who that is, who inspires them, what kind of change has been so meaningful to the world through their eyes. And so letting there be choice in topics or how learning is presenting, I think goes a really long way for students to feel seen in the classroom, like, wow, they let me choose what I'm interested in, as well as like, wow, I feel like I'm so great at creating Minecraft worlds or drawing or with my tech skills, that when that is seen, they feel seen and they feel more confident. Like I think someone mentioned in the chat, like it is all about boosting confidence, because when we have confident learners, I think that anything is possible. Rocket ships are possible. Changing the world is possible if you give students the opportunity to drive, because if they're always being directed, I think that does not set them up for success. If they are like following a manual every single step of the way, I think that learning and doing after school becomes very difficult and very misguided. So if we can allow these kinds of first attempts at learning here in the classroom, I think that we really do the best for learners.
One piece that I would keep in mind that's kind of implied in a lot of what other people have mentioned is just carving out some time to be specifically learner centered. Like, can you find even 10 minutes a day or half an hour on Fridays or whenever that you're really going to try out a new learner centered practice? I saw in the chat someone asked about TK or K, and so for our students, we have a time at the end of the day for 30 minutes called deliberate practice, where students are making choices about what academic skills they want or practice with. And it also could be like fine motor skills. And we support them at the beginning of the year in suggesting some choices, but are open to what they bring to it as well. Even within an academic block, even within like math or reading, for our youngest learners, we have something called shelf work, where they have a number of different like center like materials that they can choose from to practice skills that they've learned. And so they have time at the end of each math block or reading block to make choices about what shelf work they're going to work on. And that's just a small way that you're giving students choice about their learning, and they get to think about which of these is a just right challenge for me, which of these is really going to push my learning forward, which of these have I already mastered. And a lot of that is also Montessori inspired. So I think that's another good resource to look at for the 3 to 6 year old age range if you're looking to bring more learner-centered practices into your classroom.
Well, this has been really great, and I just want to share my appreciation for you all for not only sharing your perspective, but sharing really concrete examples. I speak for myself when I come to something like this, like a webinar or a workshop, I always want to leave with something tangible. So I'm over here jotting down a whole bunch of them, and that's a testament to you all being able to share your work. So thank you for doing that. As we close out, I always like to ask something that's inspiring you. I know that we've shared a little bit about research or mentors or folks that have inspired us, but is there anything people should get their hands on right now that they should listen to this summer, read this summer? Yeah, what's inspiring you right now? I'll just leave it open for anyone that wants to share.
This is something that you might have to look for in your own way, in your own place. But the thing that inspires me most probably is the chance to collaborate and work with other teachers. So last week, Utah had several CTE conferences, and I was able to attend. And I was inspired at the ways other teachers are just bringing creativity into their classroom and giving their students the opportunity for choice. My favorite workshop, and I do teach career and technical education, family and consumer sciences, but my favorite workshop was so creative, but it was also very rigorous. The teacher brought in half-size dress forms and gave us a short little workshop on draping. And we had 3 hours to create a half-size dress out of 1 yard of fabric. And it was fantastic. You know, she gave us this little sort of direction and expectation, but then it was up to us to design. And we were just a classroom full of designers, and it was interesting to see teachers with more of a growth mindset who were saying, okay, this is challenging. I haven't done anything like this before, but I'm going to take the challenge. And then also to see teachers who said, oh, well, I'm not really going to spend much time on this and I can go home early. And, you know, to see that with teachers was interesting, but also to hear the presenter's perspective, where she's taught 7th and 8th graders and she's given them these types of challenges and she holds them to the challenge and really doesn't let them off the hook. They're expected to make these magical things happen. But when you're given the opportunity to be creative, there's something so powerful about creativity that makes you want to push yourself and challenge yourself. And it's really a joyful process. So I think as much as we can seek out opportunities to bring creativity into our classrooms, that's really going to generate a lot of power for our students.
Absolutely. I love creative challenges, and I gave my students some creative challenges this year, and the kinds of things that they are able to come up with is just astonishing. We created our own civilizations and created artifacts with them, and then the other class dug them up and had to understand their culture based on only artifacts. The kinds of imagination that kids have is really amazing. But I would really like to say what is inspiring me right now is actually just local sites. And this could be because I'm a social studies teacher, and there's just so much history around us. But I have been inspired by just some local parks recently. I have a colleague, and we're close to San Jose, and there was a statue that was being removed. And so being able to be inspired by the world around us feels not only very real world, but an opportunity to bring that curiosity to decisions that are being made in our communities. And so I've been looking into going to some local museums, and even just the park and some of the statues that might be represented there, or why this park is here, or who is allowed to access this park. There's so many great questions that I think learners could be wondering, or if you open it up to a learner, like, what are you curious about? The statues being removed, what kind of questions do you have? Really opens up the conversation around, like, what is this place that we're living in? And also, how do you have a say in it? Like, well, there's so many different avenues for you to be involved in this. Should you choose to be, or why might it be a good idea to be involved in this? How can we make our voices be heard? So taking what we try to establish in the classroom and like zooming out a little bit to see how that can also be applicable in the real world. I think that sets students up for success and really gets those inquiry questions bubbling.
Yeah, I love that. Also, just always local museums all the time. Always great. I'd love to. I think this lends itself to my more techie background, but I love to find something that I'm interested in and then reverse engineer it and see the process of, how it got from whatever it was to what it is now, which is always really interesting and great if you do basically anything. I was gonna say project-based stuff, but it's good for whatever. And then something that I took with me from a phonics training once, and it was probably one of the most powerful things I've ever heard in terms of education. It was a phonics training, and the leader had said, before we get started on this, I want you to really think about one student that this will be beneficial for. And ever since she'd said that, every time I do like any planning, especially if I'm really not in the mood to do planning, or it's something that's like a little bit more taxing than others, I like to really sit down and think about what one kid that might not be particularly into group plans, or this person might struggle with whatever it is that I'm about to push onto the group. Thinking about that one child and how I can help them as a person, and adapt my whatever I'm going to throw at them to make it so that they actually get something out of it as well, and just reflecting back to like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm not going to think about the milestones. I'm not going to think about, creating this specific curriculum so that I hit this, and this. But like, okay, I'm going to put myself in this kid who I care about a lot's shoes. What does this child need? How is this child going to get the most out of this really cool thing that I want to plan for them? And I love that so much. So that has inspired me for the last year.
I will give a book recommendation. So this is the book that we sent to all of our new teachers and that I recommend to any parents that are looking to understand why we do what we do. And that is The Self-Driven Child by William Stixrud and Ned Johnson. And this book really gets into the brain science of why giving students agency and autonomy is so important and is what will lead to their happiness and success. And it just provides great context for why learner-centered is so important. The focus is really on middle school, high school age students, but I think it is completely applicable to elementary students as well. And it is the basis for everything we do. So that's my piece of inspiration, The Self-Driven Child.
Wow, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your perspective and for your advice and your inspiration. This was like better than I could have ever imagined. I love all the examples you shared. I feel really inspired and my cup feels really full. I want to close this out with this quote of, "Those who are willing to show up and be brave, not perfect, are paving the way and innovating to create the path forward." And I think that was reiterated here today, that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to try to put learners at the center just a little bit more each day. And so grateful for you all. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. Is there anything anyone wants to share? I want to like make sure that you could all like chat. You don't have to stay on mute, but you can share. Or I'm going to close this out. Yeah, do you want to share like parting words or a takeaway?
Just that this is a lovely group of educators, and thank you so much for being on the panel and sharing your wisdom. This is the kind of thing that even just attending a panel or a conference, I leave feeling so inspired. So thank you all.